Are you a fan of horror movies?
Necronomicon Ex Mortis, the Book of the Dead.
What about cult classics?
Your move, creep.
If you are, you'll love Shocking Things. Please search for us on all the major podcasting platforms. To see our social media and a direct link to our podcast, please go to anchor.fm/shockingthings.
BST presents Derailed. Steve Garcia versus Zachariah Gibbs. The Bike Club defend their BST Wrestling Tag Team Championships against The Haven, Ichiban versus Kylon King. We have a four-corner tag team elimination match featuring War and Peace, Perfectly Sexy, The Firm, and Buff Inc. We have El Presagio versus Jarrett Diaz versus Matt Awesome. Big Juicy defends her Monarchs Championship versus Jesse Nolan. Dustin Flash Waller will defend his BST Heavyweight Championship versus Big Jim Anderson.
So, all right, everybody, welcome to the PWZ podcast. Tonight, I have a very special guest with me from Alliance blog, alliance-wrestling.com, J-Cal. How the hell are you, sir?
I'm good, man. I got my Pro Wrestling Zone hat on right now.
Hey, we got actually, I ordered some hats, so I'm looking forward to that. I'm going to have to get you one as soon as they come in.
We'll do a one-for-one swap. I'll send you one. You could send me one.
There you go. Thank you for the support every week. You give me a shout out. I really appreciate that. And I've wanted to have you on a long time because I've never really seen somebody that's consistently passionate about the National Wrestling Alliance as I am, and especially post Crockett years, which you don't really see a lot of that. You know, I've always been infatuated with the post Crockett years. It's just something that has interested me for such almost going on 3 decades now, right? I think.
Right. Yeah.
So, what turned you on? Go ahead.
It's a bit of an anomaly, right? Because our good friend Dr. Robert Stinson from This Is Pro Wrestling podcast kind of coined the term the wilderness years, and I get that to an extent, but the wilderness needs to be explored, and there's so much stuff. And I know that sounds so ambiguous, but there's so much stuff that happened in that time when Ric Flair left the, when the NWA and Jim Crockett promotion split in 1993 to, Ken Shamrock winning the title on Impact or TNA, the first TNA pay-per-view. So much stuff happened in between there. And, I've always been a sucker for history, but it just turns out that the NWA history is kind of rich with these wild tales and just some good, some bad, just interesting stories. Yep.
Is that what drew you to it? I mean, what drew you to covering the NWA, creating Alliance Wrestling, and it's there's just a lot of love there, and I it's one of my favorite sites to read because it's just some cool stuff. Because a lot of people don't know about the NWA, like what had happened, say in the 90s or even in the 2000s. There was a lot of groups and a lot of really good stuff that people don't know about.
It's kind of funny, and I promise I'm not trying to name drop here, but I was just talking to NWA Gold earlier today. Mm-hmm. He covers the titles and the title histories. We were literally just talking before this podcast, and there's so much history out there that gets forgotten about and not spoken about, and I think that's a shame. Over the last few years, I have this new appreciation for Mike Rapata, who a lot of people have no idea who that man is, but he was a steward of the NWA 10 Pounds of Gold when nobody else really was. There wasn't a National Wrestling Alliance that was getting recognition by the mainstream media. There was no PW Insider covering, what was going on in Music City Wrestling, or, Wrestling One wasn't talking about what Brody was doing down in Florida, or what Carino was doing with the World's Heavyweight Championship. There was just this lack of coverage. And, part of it was because we live in this bygone era where, the internet was in its infancy then, and there wasn't such a thing as these 24-hour news cycles. So some of this history is out there, and it's easy enough to find, but people just don't take the time to go research and read about it. And I think there's something kind of, I'm not going to get too sentimental here, but something beautiful about being able to keep that history alive. It's the same kind of people who are big into World War II history or into the Civil War era history. It's just there's these stories out there that have gone by the wayside, and I think that those men and women that carried the NWA banner in those years deserve every bout of recognition as, say, Bruce Tharp or David Marquez or whoever you associate with the National Wrestling Alliance.
What was with Bruce Tharp? He did, did he buy it out at one point? Bought the name? He was the first post, territory days, or for lack of a better term, territory days, if I remember correctly, right?
Well, Bruce, that's where you get into controversy, right? And these are some of the stories that we can tell, and some of the stories I don't have enough information to tell, but essentially there was a lawsuit, right? Mm-hmm. For those of you who don't know, one of the reasons that an independent wrestling promotion would associate with the National Wrestling Alliance, aside from using the lineage and the 3 letters, is that there was an insurance policy that all wrestling promotions, good standing wrestling promotions, are supposed to have insurance policies at each of their events. I mean, that's just most standard sporting athletic commissions will require that. Most buildings, for you to rent them out, will require that if you're having like a wrestling match or something of that nature in those events. So you have to have some sort of insurance. And there became a disagreement on that insurance and what it actually covered and what it didn't cover. And it ended up in litigation. There was no secret that Bruce Tharp had aspirations of doing something big with the NWA. When he became problematic, the NWA was going to just force him out. But then he filed suit. He had a few people on board with him. And at the end of the day, by hook or by crook, I'm not going to say for sure which one it was, he ended up with the assets of the National Wrestling Alliance. So basically, instead of continuing the discourse and continuing the litigation, the board of directors of the National Wrestling Alliance, which included Dave Marquez and Fred Rubenstein and a couple other guys whose names I can't think of right now, Jim Miller, that's all I can think of off the top of my head. They relinquished their rights to the NWA. Bill Behrens, how can I forget Bill?
Oh, Bill, yeah.
Yeah, so they relinquished their rights to the NWA to avoid further litigation, so there was no financial burden for them. And so for the first time ever, at that monumental moment, it went from being a co-op to single ownership. Because a pro wrestling organization, which was the LLC that was held by the old NWA administration, was a co-op of different members owning this LLC. Now this new LLC was a partnership of Fred Rubenstein, Chris Ronquillo, and Bruce Tharp. And so they had the ownership at that point. So it went from a group ownership to a private ownership with 3 people in charge. And it wasn't long before they kind of turned on each other. Fred was the first one jettisoned from the group, and then it came down to Bruce and Chris, and they didn't see eye to eye. There was a separation there, and at that point, Bruce became the sole owner of the NWA, the only person before Billy to own the NWA.
Now that was like the Rob Conway era, right? Did he make right? Okay, that's right. And then he just he spent a lot of time basically in Japan with the belt, or Bruce had a huge connection in Japan, if I remember correctly, right?
Yeah, and I don't want to speculate on the things that I'm not 100% sure of. But yeah, there was this is like everything kind of came together at once where the litigation was going on. You had that 7 levels of hate between Adam Pearce and Colt Cabana. That was coming to a conclusion. The NWA determined that it did not want to go further with a relationship with Colt Cabana, the new NWA. And so, Adam and Colt dropped the title in Australia. Adam lost the match, so he could not be champion anymore. That was the crux of the whole thing. He would leave the NWA if he couldn't beat Colt. And Colt essentially forfeited the title, vacated the title, however you want to say it. So they left Australia. Neither one of them was champion. And then the title was determined at a match at Dangerous Adrenaline Wrestling Gladiators out in Vinland, New Jersey, I think, where they had I think it was originally an 8-man turned into a 9-man elimination match. And the last person in was Tokyo Monster Kahagas. He wins the title, and subsequently, it was a lot of people were expecting Damian Wayne to be champion or Chance Prophet, but it did end up in fact being Tokyo Monster Kahagas. And then he had the title. He had the title for a short time. Took it to the Dominican Republic, which was the first time the title had been there in many, many years. And he ended up. He was supposed to face Jack Stane in San Antonio, Texas, for Branded Outlaw Wrestling. Jax was injured. Rob Conway stepped in. Conway won the title. And yeah, you were correct. He did get booked in Japan. I'm not exactly sure how that relationship came about, but New Japan Pro Wrestling and the NWA had a bit of a working agreement during that time. Jack Stane and Rob Conway both were wrestling for New Japan. They represented the NWA as tag team champions and as the world's heavyweight champion. Chase Owens became a part of New Japan during that time. He was the NWA World Junior Heavyweight Champion. And then they had a lot of other guys who showed up too, like Wes Briscoe, the North American champion Big Daddy Yum Yum, and Michael Tarver, who worked a lot of the NWA Florida Independents, or he worked in the Florida Independents, but did work for the NWA on occasion. And he also had an opportunity to head to Japan and wrestle for the NWA.
Interesting. Did Bruce have television at all?
So Bruce, as the owner of the NWA, no, he had no television. He didn't even really have a promotion. But there were members in the NWA at that time that did have television. Okay. So there's South Athletic Wrestling or something like that. NWA Saw in Tennessee. Showtime All-Star Wrestling. That's what it was. Showtime All-Star Wrestling. They were based in Tennessee. Innovative Pro Wrestling, also based in Tennessee. Both back then it was called Smoky Mountain. Excuse me, Innovative Pro.
Oh, I remember NWA Smoky Mountain. They used to run on YouTube like every Saturday morning or something. I watched that show. I really liked a lot.
Yeah, Tony Gibbons, great guy. Talked to him quite a bit. He has a knack for talent. Again, he helped find Chase Owens. He more or less discovered Jason Kincaid. And, he had used a lot of guys in that area, Conway, Jax, Scrap Iron, Adam Pearce. I really liked what he was putting out, and they're back running now again, too. So kudos to Tony and his crew.
Oh, that's cool. Very cool. Let me ask you, I want to know some stuff about J-Cal.
Sure.
So, because I don't know a lot of the history. How did you start Alliance Wrestling? Your website. I guess you had a different site beforehand, if I remember correctly. I think I thought you mentioned that at one point.
Well, my site has always been alliance-wrestling.com.
Okay.
I first started as a blog spot on Blogger, like a Google Blogger account. Yep. And I went with the name NWA Wrestling Fan Page, something like that. And it served me well for a while, but I kind of got the idea that at some point, if I wrote something that the NWA didn't like, that maybe they might tell me to shut my page down. And no one expressed that to me. No one came out and said that to me, but it was something that I always thought. Plus, if I ever decided to sell hats or T-shirts, I wanted to be able to use my NWA or my logo, and I couldn't use an NWA logo because I wasn't a member. So I started alliance-wrestling.com as an actual site. I think it was we had been doing it since 2007, but I think the site, the actual name didn't come till much later, like 2008, 2009.
Okay.
And I got into it because I felt like there was an underserved market, right? Back then, there was an NWA wrestling website, but it wasn't updated very often. And it was kind of funny because you had each member had their own website, and then the NWA had their website. And if you wanted to find anything, I mean, you literally were going down a Yahoo search engine, looking. And it was getting more and more unrealistic to find NWA news and information. So at first it started more of as a curation where I would find the articles and then I would share them. And I started off using a message board because the NWA had one, and they dropped their message board. I was like, well, we still need to have a message board, so I made one. And then when I saw that the site wasn't covering enough of the news that I was interested in, I started covering that. What really kind of kicked it off was the Reclaiming the Glory tournament that they did after they separated from Impact Wrestling, when NWA and Impact ended their relationship. I wanted to know what was happening in this tournament. And again, the website, the NWA website, wasn't covering it. You would literally go to a promotion's website to find the results. And being in Southern California, we had this really great website that covered the entire area so well. It's called SoCal Uncensored, still exists. And I modeled what they were doing there in the state of California to the United States, to the NWA. And I tried to emulate what Steve and SoCal Uncensored was doing for the NWA for the territories.
I remember that NWA website that you're speaking of, and it wasn't very good. And it just had a lot of links to the other groups, and half of them were dead most of the time when you tried. And then some of them would just have like, oh, here's a video, and it's just like the same video for months on end, But wasn't kept up very well. The only website that I thought was updated somewhat regularly was the Wildside website. So that, and they always put their TV up there if you couldn't catch it. So that was. What did you think of NWA Wildside? While I have you here.
Yeah, absolutely. So I never really caught Wildside. Remember back then the YouTube didn't exist. In 1999, 2000, there was no YouTube.
Right.
There was a lot of tape trading. Which at the time, the little bit of tape trading I did was more focused on Japan and what was happening with some of the WWE developmentals. So Wildside kind of flew under the radar for me. I did catch a few episodes. I don't know if you remember the American One channel. It was like they put their content on the internet, and this is a wild concept because today we're like, oh yeah, that makes total sense. But back then,
it's normal. Yeah.
Back then that was groundbreaking, and we were on dial-up modems with 33.6K speed, so to watch it was kind of painful, and then if someone picked up the phone, then you're toast.
Right.
So I mean, this was technology has certainly come a long way. What Bill Behrens did, the maturation from Music City Wrestling to heading to Georgia with Wildside, I mean, it was great. Wildside created an opportunity for a whole new generation of wrestlers. Some of those guys got looks at WCW. Some of them got looks at the WWE. Of course, the ties that it had with Impact Wrestling when that started. And then NWA Anarchy in and of itself. I mean, towards the end of the prosperity of NWA Wildside and Anarchy, I mean, sure, the show looked a little dated, but the talent that they were able to come up with, unbeatable.
I discovered Wildside by accident one night. I moved into a new apartment, me and my first wife, and I didn't have cable at first. So I turned on the TV with an antenna, and there was this America One, and they would run 3 hours of wrestling starting at midnight every Saturday, and that was there. And literally, I made sure I tuned in every Saturday night. to watch that. We had just had our first kid, so it was a lot of fun to discover that. And if I remember correctly, Wildside was associated with WCW as sort of a developmental towards like the later years, because guys like AJ and Air Paris and
Right.
guys like that would show up on like Worldwide and Saturday Night and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of those guys were enhancement, and
Yeah.
I don't know, that even goes back to when Bill was working with Music City Wrestling. I mean, Mike Rapata was a regular enhancement worker for WCW Saturday Night.
I remember. Yeah.
And a lot of those guys came from Tennessee, like Chris Harris before he was, America's Most Wanted. He was enhancement with WCW.
He was called Chris Williams, I think, on a Saturday Night one.
Yeah, that
So,
makes sense.
It didn't even make sense. I didn't even think of it until I saw it years later that he was. It's like, wait a second, that's Chris Harris.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's cool. There was like a lot of really cool stuff at that time period with the NWA. And but like I said, it's not known. So I do want to know about your trip to China. You took a trip, didn't you?
Yeah. So, okay, so I got to preface this by saying,
No, I think it's amazing.
it was, right? So I'm a small business owner outside of my wrestling world. So I do have some options and some affordability to do things that most people don't get to do. And when I was in China, I had I was actually researching equipment for my business.
Oh.
So I wrote it. No, this is all just I'm joking. This is stuff that I used as some of it as a business expense. I mean, I legitimately was contacting manufacturing plants in China about importing equipment for my business. But when I was there, I was just there for wrestling. The flight, believe it or not, to China was very inexpensive. We were in a 5-star hotel that was very inexpensive. I mean, I think in total I spent maybe $600 or $700 out of pocket.
Wow.
And that's to get to China. That's to stay in the hotel. And again, my relationship with Dave Marquez helped out a lot. He pointed me in the right direction to get the. When you go to China, you don't just get a passport, but you also need a visa to get into the country. And even though I wasn't working, I wasn't under any kind of employment, you just need a visa to be there. So I can go to China for the next 8 years without any problem at all, although I don't really want to go right now. Going there was pretty cool. And it's very eye-opening. Like I've traveled a little, like I've been to Mexico, which is, I mean, that's pretty reasonable. I've been to Jamaica, which is, again, fairly reasonable, but China was just a different experience. Walking the streets of the downtown Wenzhou, China, not speaking a lick of Mandarin or any kind of subset of that language, and seeing people just so frustrated that this American can't speak English. I was hanging out with Watts from the United Wrestling Network and Championship Wrestling from Hollywood, and I was hanging out with Reno Scum a lot, and the looks that the people gave to see, first of all, Watts, who is a black man, African American. He's like 6'10" with his afro. He's probably close to 7 foot, and people would stop in their tracks and just marvel at this man, who they've never seen anything like that. And I thought, wow, that must be weird for him. And then I saw Reno Scum walk into the breakfast area and having a mohawk and covered in sleeve tattoos. And all of a sudden, they didn't care about Watts anymore. They're like, what's going on with these two? And the sponsors for the show took the wrestlers, took the talent, and we would go to different spots in Wenzhou and the surroundings area. So we were going to like a car dealership. It was I can't remember what dealership it was. It'll come to me later. But like we were hanging at a car dealership and taking photos, and they had drones flying over, and like hundreds of photographers. And for me, my role there was to document it. So I stood back. I'm watching my friend Dave Marquez. I'm watching my friend Dave Lagana, Nick Aldis, Reno Scum, Colt Boom Boom Cabana. Like these guys are just living it up, having fun. And it was just such a bizarre experience. We saw like a little a little pug walking down the street, and Colt Cabana's giving it water, and it was very surreal, but not much different than like any other major like city in in the United States. Not unlike Los Angeles.
What was the event like?
So it was a huge arena, and by huge arena, I mean like easily 10,000, 15,000 people.
Wow.
They didn't have that many people. And there's actually a funny story that Lagana would tell, is that they were walking around. There's a Walmart and a McDonald's inside of the Walmart, just literally across the street. Now I didn't leave the venue just because I didn't feel like going anywhere. I was kind of worn out from all of our other adventures, and somebody in the Walmart was trying to sell these American tourists tickets to the wrestling show tonight, not knowing that it was Colt Cabana's face on the poster. Like, you're talking to the guy that's on the show. Why would he buy your tickets? He's going to be there. Remember, like that is a communist country, and even though a lot of the people there had freedoms, like what we saw, there was a lot of freedom there. It was a state produced event, so I think it was one of those deals where like, oh, we have wrestling today, and I think people were expected to come. There was a guy in the audience who actually had his own 10 pounds of gold, his own replica, and it was like, I have my own 10 pounds of gold replica, but his was like, he's like, yeah, it cost me $500 American, and I'm like, wow, that looks amazing. Like, it looked very, very realistic, of almost like what was in the ring. And then but I would say most of the people there were unfamiliar with the sport of professional wrestling. They're used to either like mixed martial arts, so they were unaccustomed to like, somebody diving outside of the ring. They were unaccustomed to, a drop kick or a flying body press. These were just foreign moves to them. And I was told, like, yes, the WWE had started doing shows there, but it was still relatively new. And so what they were performing was relatively unknown. A lot of praise goes to, the NWA came to China, but it wasn't like it was as big of a deal as you think. In China, it was just, a muscle man. Nick Aldis wasn't, they wouldn't have known Nick Aldis from Brian Cage, from Sean Ricker, Eli Drake. It didn't matter. The belt had some recognition for those people who, have watched wrestling. But again, like, there isn't a YouTube in China. You can't jump on YouTube. There isn't a Facebook in China. Like, it's all blocked.
What?
Yeah.
Really? Wow.
We had a VPN to get on social media, and I did. And I was like, the whole time I was like, had this paranoia that I was going to get arrested by the state police for accessing social media that I shouldn't have been on. But I took the risk.
Wow.
Anyways. And it was for you guys. It was for the fans.
There you go. And we appreciate it.
Yeah.
Did you see that episode of Dark Side of the Ring on the Collision in Korea? Like,
yes.
That event? That's what it sounds similar to.
It wasn't nearly as intense.
Right.
Again,
I'm sorry. Like, the event, like, nobody seemed to know what professional wrestling was, and it was this very high security. So it sounds crazy.
I remember walking around the building with my camera because I was trying to get good shots. Like, I was there to be the, quote unquote ringside photographer. And I mean, I wrote an article for Pro Wrestling Illustrated. It never got published, but
wow.
I think PW Insider ended up. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
I think PW Insider ended up using it. But I talked about Simon Inoki's wrestling promotion out there. I talked about the night that the World's Heavyweight Championship came to China. So I'm walking around the venue trying to get photos of the ring, and I walked around one spot I wasn't supposed to be at, and there were armed guys, like guards, and I'm like, they're the police, and there was no trouble. They didn't hold me up or anything. I had a pass that let me go anywhere, so they're just like, They went back to talking whatever they were talking about, but it was pretty extreme. But at the same time, it was like, if I would have just stayed in the arena, I wouldn't have known anything. It just seemed like any other wrestling show. The audience wasn't really smart to what professional wrestling is, but by the end of it, workers can work, and you saw some guys get over who, just naturally can get over.
I've seen a couple of those matches because I guess during the pandemic, 2020 was a pretty insane year. So Championship Wrestling from Hollywood, I believe. I know they aired the Aldis and Colt match. I've seen that there, and I think they might have done some others. So, it took me however many years to finally be able to see it. So, but it was pretty interesting because there's literally no crowd reaction. And watching wrestling, it's like it doesn't happen that often. It's
one of the things that really kind of blew me away. So Watts ended up teaming with a fellow by the name of Alex Chamberlain, who was actually not originally booked. The guy that they originally booked did not know that you needed a visa to enter the country. So he had his passport but no visa. So he was just a non-factor. So Marquez was literally in the airport at LAX the Saturday night before we left, calling people. I mean, I was literally on my phone messaging wrestlers that I know that have been in China recently. Hey, you want to go to China? And I talked to one wrestler who is now wrestling for New Japan Pro Wrestling, and they flat out told me, I get $1,000 a night working in New Japan. Can you guys pay me that? And I'm like, I can't pay you anything, brother. I don't know what you're talking about. But Alex Chamberlain ended up stepping up to it, and so he teamed with Watts against Reno Scum for the United Wrestling Network tag team titles. And the Reno Scum came out there and do what Reno Scum does, and it got over. And I mean, you had this Chinese crowd who I would imagine most of the folks didn't speak English, and they were chanting "Oi, oi, oi," and champions forever, Watts never. I mean, they were getting into it. So the workers could work. Yes, it was mostly quiet, especially during the Colt and Aldis match, because it was definitely worked a different style, and I think that was a sign of respect, but also they just didn't know what to expect.
Right. So, tell me about your. Let's talk about Nick Aldis a little bit. Now, I heard you today. I heard you today talking about him a little bit. I'm a huge Nick Aldis fan. But I believe that. I'm not saying this him holding the belt. You said today that he's defended 5 times in the last year. Is that correct?
So the number, obviously the number's growing, but during this, see, and this is where I sound like a dick, right? Because we're in the middle of a global pandemic,
right?
And the NWA essentially shuts down from March of 2020. Really late February 2020 when they cancel the Crockett Cup. Right. And they don't start running again until roughly March of 2021. So the promotion itself is basically down for an entire year. Now, other talents find a way to find work. Thunder Rosa, she's working at her home promotion, Mission Pro. I mean, I guess that's not...
She's been all over the place, really.
Right.
I mean, with all Elite Wrestling. And yeah.
That's kind of where I'm going. So you have a talent like Thunder Rosa who's hungry and wants to carry that NWA banner. So she's wrestling, defending her title in Mission Pro. She makes appearances with SW Fury. What has she got with her? The Burke. When she's in AEW, got the Burke with her. Dave Marquez did the Primetime Live series.
Sorry.
No problem. Thunder Rosa makes 2 appearances on that show, losing the title on her second appearance in a match against Serena Deeb. Then you get to Nick Aldis. And again, this is where I sound like a dick because we are in the middle of a global pandemic. Even now, we're still in this pandemic. We're still going through it. So I can understand as a father and a husband that you don't want to put your family at risk. You don't want to take bookings where that's dangerous. You don't want to take bookings where it's unsafe. I mean, how many talents, WWE talents, are coming down with COVID? You know, and if it can happen in the WWE, it can happen anywhere. So you have to give some leeway. You have to kind of say, okay, I get it. But I just feel like at that time, when you had Thunder Rosa working so hard, that she became the face of the franchise. And I felt like that things changed, things shifted. And I felt like Nick Aldis should have been doing the same. If not, I can't expect Nick Aldis to work for AEW because AEW has to call Nick Aldis and say, hey, do you want to work? I don't know if that conversation ever happened. I don't know that Nick Aldis was called by SWE Fury and say, "Hey Nick, do you want to wrestle here?" You know what I mean? We can't say that any of these phone calls happened. I know Nick had a match in Texas against Nobi Bryant. It was originally supposed to be against Jeff Cobb and the winner of the Night 1 Battle Royal, who ended up being Nobi Bryant. So it was supposed to be Jeff Cobb, Nobi Bryant, and Nick Aldis. It ended up becoming a one-on-one Nobi Bryant versus Nick Aldis. That was his first match since the pandemic started. So he had one defense against, I can't remember the gentleman's name. I think it's Marcus Burke up in Nova Scotia.
Okay.
Then he had a match against Flip Gordon at the NWA pay-per-view in January, and those were both title matches. Then he had his third title match in Texas against Nobi Bryant, and then would wrestle in Primetime Live, the Dave Marquez pay-per-view series, against Mike Bennett. So that was match 3. And then he had, match 4. And then he had match 5 against Brian Pillman Jr. at 127 Wrestling Promotions in Tennessee. So again, you can't blame a guy for being cautious. You can't blame a guy for taking those measures. But I went back and looked in his history, and historically, there's never been those few defenses in a year. And I mean, even talking, not the National Wrestling Alliance, but the National Wrestling Association, that existed during World War II. And I mean, World War II, they literally, houses were blacking out here on the West Coast because of fear that we were being invaded. And I can't remember the champion at the time, but I looked it up, and the gentleman had 13 defenses that year. And I just thought, World War II, wrestling was still happening. Even post 9/11, the week after 9/11, Steve Corino was defending that title. So I had this uneasiness with Nick Aldis. And again, maybe I'm the dick, right? Maybe I'm the asshole.
No, I don't necessarily disagree with you, because I mean, wrestling is a full year thing. There's no off season, you know what I mean? And there's other champions out there. And during the time period, I just want to throw this out there, Thunder Rosa, during that time period when she became one of my favorite wrestlers, not just female wrestlers, she just became one of my favorite wrestlers in that time period. Just Nick, him going to AEW, I asked him that. I had him on the show, last year, I think.
Yeah.
And his only response was only if it makes sense. And it just seemed like a question they didn't necessarily want to even talk about. So, I mean, it is what it is. I wish that he would defend a little more and do a little bit more. If you think about, take NWA Power, where he comes out all the time and he does a lot of promos. Back in the day, the same thing happened a lot when we were growing up. Flair would come out, and then it was building up for house shows and stuff like that. But there's no house shows happening, so it doesn't necessarily make sense that he's not necessarily doing a little bit more. I mean, but then again, the NWA roster is quite dwindled down as to what it has been in the last year as well, especially since coming back from COVID. I mean, those first couple months were really rough to me.
Well, there was definitely so during this whole time, there's a magnifying glass on Nick Aldis, especially for me, because I'm historically, he's the world's champion. Historically, the belt's not being defended. And if you look back, his first run as champion that lasted from December 9th, 2017, when he beat Tim Storm at CZW, till September 1st, 2018 at All In, when he lost to Cody. I mean, you couldn't ask for a greater world's heavyweight champion. That title run alone would put him in the upper echelon of NWA champions. I mean, you're talking about a guy who defended the title some 20 times, 15 times in the UK, a place where the 10 pounds of gold has only made a few appearances. Pierce defended it there. Blue Demon defended it there. Gary Steele, the only other UK-born pro wrestler, didn't even get an opportunity to defend the 10 pounds of gold in the UK. So that's pretty significant, and you can't take anything away from that. And then he comes back to the States and he's defending the title in Championship Wrestling from Hollywood. And he's making independent wrestling dates all across the country. And then, you know, before All In was talking about the fact that he was going to go to China, you know, that if there would have been no All In that year, that would have been the biggest thing for the NWA. So, I mean, he took the title to China, a place that has never seen the 10 pounds of gold. Harley Race wanted to take it to China. He never got that opportunity, but Aldis did. And, I mean, he's defending it on the East Coast. He's defending an MPW, and he's defending it, again, Hollywood. And he's just making defenses. He's starting to appear in Ring of Honor. And then you see this guy, he's with House of Hardcore, and he's defending the title in Australia. So in the span of, like, not even an entire year, like I think 9 months, he's defended the title in the UK. He's defended it all over the United States. He's defended it in China, and he's defended it in Australia. So 4 continents and like 9 months. That's incredible. And some of the names he faced, you know, some of the guys, no big deal, but some of them are pretty big names.
In other countries, it's hard for us to gauge who's popular over there. You know what I mean? Whether they're worthy of a title shot, but it is the NWA World Championship. That's the other thing. You know, I
do believe he faced Robbie Eagles when he was in Australia, who was pretty well known, and then he also faced Bronson Reed, who I can't remember his name when he was in Australia, but I can't remember.
Yeah, he was a PWG guy at one time as well. So
yes,
I can't remember his name prior to WWE right now. So
he was part of that TMDK group that produced like. Mikey Nichols and Shane Hayes, who both were in WWE for a short time.
Right.
But yeah, so I mean, I felt like the competition level was high. The matches that he had were great. He was defending it all over. That to me was amazing. Now you can't expect him to keep that up forever, but as soon as Power started taping, his defenses outside of the NWA began to diminish. Now, to the point that you made, they're not doing house shows. He's not defending the title on television. It's reserved essentially for pay-per-view. I mean, he did the one defense against Tim Storm on the first episode of Power.
Yep.
But then after that, the title isn't defended on Power, and now he's not defending it outside of the NWA. And so he went from having like 40 matches in a year to like 20, and then 5.
All right. So I see where you're going with this. I see where, you know, I am agreeing now that you broke it down like that. Yeah.
But now let me take one step back and say, I still think Nick Aldis is a phenomenal champion.
He is. Yeah.
He has a great look. The promos are money. He's solid in the ring. I would say I hope he's doing a little bit more cardio as we get to the 73rd. You know, I'm not one to say anything about a body. I'm definitely not a body guy, right? But I've seen it diminish abilities just in his last 2 matches that I've seen, which was Stephen Bonner and Trevor Murdoch. He's not the same guy he was. And I know age catches up with everybody, but the guy's still in his prime, and I believe he's capable of better. I think he can do more, and that's where all of my animosity comes from. You're a 5-tool player. You should be a 5-tool player.
Right. So, what do you think about NWA 73 coming up? I'm pretty excited about this. When they announced it, they're going back to the chase the first time in, what did they say, 37 years?
Yeah.
Is that what? Yeah. I think that might be a little inaccurate because I know once the NWA left there, WWF did about a year of TV taping. It's actually not even, so maybe.
Yeah.
So.
No, it was this is, I mean, you could honestly say it's the first time the NWA has been in the chase for like 37 years. Yes. And I think that is, in and of itself, that's the draw. That to me is huge.
That I find incredible. Before we get into NWA 73, did you ever see the old Wrestling at the Chase DVD set that I think High Spots released it a number of years back?
I never did catch that, and I'll be completely honest. I am kind of this weird paradigm here where I grew up in a WWF house. We lived in, I live in Southern California, and although cable was readily available by like 1983, 1984, I didn't really discover Jim Crockett Promotions until almost 1987. So, I mean, I did get to see a lot of the Horsemen and a lot of the Stings and the Legion or Road Warriors, the varsity squad, Rick Steiner, Scott Steiner, Doom, a lot of the Midnight Express, Rock and Roll Express. I got to see a lot of that on television, and we were ordering the pay-per-views every month, it felt like. But historically wise, I never really got into the stuff that predated that time frame, unless it was Los Angeles. Out here, we had the Grand Olympic, which was such a mecca of pro wrestling, and the history of the area out here really is important to me. And I like when I could see like a John Tolos match or a Freddie Blassie match or a Rowdy Piper match or Chavo Guerrero match, I tend to flock to that. Santo was out here a lot. Mil Mascaras was out here a lot. So that's kind of like where I tend to flock to. So I'll be honest, that I know the significance of the chase, but I don't know the significance of the chase.
Right. I feel you. That's awesome though that you did mention John Tolos. I love that guy. The guy was kind of a lunatic back in his day. So I love him, and and I remember watching him commentate for Herb Abrams UWF as well.
Gosh.
And
yes.
He was hilarious. Hey man, I don't know. I still go back and watch those old UWF or Herb Abrams UWF tapes every now and again. They're quite hilarious to watch, but
I will never forget seeing like Terry Gordy there and seeing Dr. Death there and just wondering like, what is going on in this place? You have Scott Putski. He was there. I mean, just the roster was wild. It was just like, hey, what are you doing? You want to come work on a wrestling show that's nationally syndicated? Let's do this.
But he had Mick Foley before he like really broke out.
Right.
That's the thing. I just remember watching him, Cactus Jack in, say, the USWA in World Class before that. And then, he's in a hotel ballroom wrestling, and then next thing you know, he's, he might have went to ECW, I think, or WCW and then ECW after that. And, and then he just broke out and it's like one of the biggest stars in the history of the sport. So that's pretty awesome in itself. So there's NWA 73 coming up. Is it the 29th?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, the 28th is the Empower. I don't have the card for that in front of me, but I do have NWA 73 card in front of me.
If you want to talk about the 73rd, I have the card or the Empower. I have most of the cards in front of me.
Yeah, I mean, if you have some of the information with you, I know some of the talent I'm not necessarily familiar with. Some of them I am. Through the NWA. If you want to talk Empower first, we can go into that.
So Empower certainly feels like the byproduct of this Forbidden Door being kicked the heck in, because you've got talent from AEW, Impact Wrestling, Ring of Honor, and then just this whole scuttlebutt of top indie talent. And to me, I think I might be more excited about the Empower card than I am about the 73rd card. Now, I'll be honest. Layla Hirsch, I know she's a badass in AEW, but she doesn't pass the sniff test to me, if you know what I mean. Like, seeing her stand in that ring with Camille, who legitimately looks like if Layla Hirsch had a twin sister and stood on top of her shoulders, she still would be shorter than Camille. And
she towers over her. It's like ridiculous.
It was a great visual in the AEW ring, but it's like,
right.
I don't know how this match works. Now, I know legit Layla is a worker. She's a shooter, and I know that this match has all the potential to be great. Just that sniff test, though, it's a little rough for me. They've announced 9 of the 10 names of the women that will be in the Invitational Battle Royal. They started off with Tootie Lynn Ramsey at the press conference, followed by Jamie Segal and her manager, drag queen Poyo Del Mar. Then they announced Chelsea Green, which was a huge. I mean, that's a huge pickup.
I think it's a huge loss for WWE.
For sure,
Chelsea Green, because she was really going forward there, and I don't know what's going on over there, to be honest with you. They're releasing a lot of big names, but I guess their losses are gain.
Absolutely, and I think. I was talking to another buddy about this offline, and they're like, well, what's going on out there? And I said, well, I mean, this is how a renaissance in wrestling happens, is when there's too much good talent stuck in one place, and now that they're free, you're going to see a lot of things happen. I mean, and I don't mean to get away from the card, but you know, the Ascension is going to be working that pay-per-view, or excuse me, not the pay-per-view, the TV tapings in Atlanta for United Wrestling Network. I mean, that's crazy to me. And I mean, they were the NXT Tag Team Champions. They were on TV, and now they're going to be working in Atlanta. And
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
It seems like once the Ascension went to the main roster, they just lost all hope in them, or they just gave up on them. It's like the first 2 weeks, they just, and then, you know, they just they didn't get over, so they just kind of, you know, lost in the shuffle. They were nothing anymore after that.
It's a byproduct of bad booking, you know.
Yeah. Well. Yeah.
And not only that, but there's just too much talent. You know, like 3 hours of television, you know, on Mondays and Fridays isn't enough.
Yeah.
And not for that roster, not the way it was. And some of these cuts had to be made. Some of them I'm still scratching my head over. But yeah, their loss is everyone else's gain. You know, Ring of Honor tweeted, who should we go after? You know, AEW stocking them up, you know, like, okay, let's get Daniel Bryan. Okay, let's get this guy. Let's get the Fiend. Who knows what you're going to see? But I just, you know, independent wrestling has always been the cream rises to the crop.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, the wrestling promotions that are out here today need to step up. You know, there needs to be more like the SW Furies of the world, the NWAs of the world, the Championship Wrestling from Atlantis of the world, and step it up and bring in these high volume talents. And that's how the wrestling is going to grow in this country. You know, it's a performance art, but it's a dying art. And if you look at the ratings, and even though that, you know, oh, look at what AEW is doing, these numbers are pale in comparison to what they were doing in the late 90s, early 2000s.
Yeah. I was going to say 1999. It was like 3 times that. You know, it's like that was like must-see TV on Monday nights, that the majority of America was tuning in on Monday nights.
And I believe I read somewhere that a wrestling promotion was canceled because of the low attendance numbers it had. I think this might have been Global Wrestling Federation at the Sportatorium. They were disappointed in the numbers that they were getting, and that's when they finally decided to just close it down. And it was like 1,200 people. And I'm like, Ring of Honor would kill for 1,200 people at their events, you know?
Right.
But just times have changed.
And don't forget, that was a building that had been popular for decades and sold out for decades. So,
yeah,
of course, you know what I mean? 1,200 to that building, the Sportatorium, after, 40 years of sellout crowds every whatever. So, yeah, you're going to be disappointed in it. But GWF was a different product. You know, than World Class, the NWA Associated League. And actually, Crockett, the NWA was there too. Crockett rebooted and started there again. And
NWA Dallas, yeah, sure.
Yeah. All right, let's get back to Empower. Sorry about that.
So no worries at all. And then they brought in Lady Frost, who, I mean, many people thought she'd be on the card. My favorite choice that they've brought in is Debbie Malenko, and I've done a lot of research on her as of late, and she's a firecracker. I mean, she's going to be the oldest woman on the card. She's 49 years old, but this lady, man, she's a true pioneer in professional wrestling. She was, imagine everything that Medusa Maselli was. Now pull back all the fame and prestige that went with it. Debbie Malenko trained at the Malenko family dojo. You know, Boris, Dean, and Simon all had a hand in training her. But one of the things that I found out recently is that she actually received additional training by Carl Gotch. Gotch was training wrestlers at the time in that Malenko dojo for the UWF, the
Japanese promotion.
The shoot fight promotion.
Yep.
And so Gotch was training wrestlers like Norman Smiley and a few others. And Debbie goes over there and says, "Hey, that looks like fun." And so she throws her hand in it, and Carl Gotch helped train her to be a wrestler. Now, keep in mind, Carl Gotch had never trained a female wrestler before her, and never trained another female wrestler after her.
That's incredible.
So she's the only women's wrestler to ever be trained by Karl Gotch. In the Japanese call Karl Gotch the wrestling god. So that's pretty significant. That's pretty meaningful. And Boris blessed her with the name Malenko when she was going to Japan, because at the time, Malenko, that name carried a lot of weight in Japan. She was wrestling as Debbie Drake in the Florida Independence, and he said, no, you need to go as a Malenko. And so she went over there and represented that family, that style, that brand of wrestling in All Japan Women's Wrestling. The same promotion that, Medusa wrestled there, Terry Powers wrestled there. There was a few talents from CMLL, like Esther Marino and Cynthia Marino. And then like Aja Kong and there's a lot of other women whose names I will butcher if I try to pronounce, but like that All Japan Women's Wrestling in the early 90s was no joke. It was one of the toughest.
High. Yeah, it was a high period for them. Yeah,
and so Debbie came over there with really just wrestling a handful of matches in Florida before going over there, and she spent about on and off like about 3 years there, winning their tag team championship, and then winning their individuals title. And she held the title for a couple of months when during a tag team match she broke her ankle, and like legitimately, like it was hanging on by the skin. It was really, really bad.
Damn.
And it was thought to be a career-ending injury, which, I mean, essentially it was. But had she been able to stick around, we might be talking about her the same way we talk about Jazz, or the same way we talk about some of the women in professional wrestling who weren't just eye candy, actually went out there and wrestled. Medusa gets a lot of pop and circumstance for how she was as a competitor, Alundra Blaze or Medusa in WCW, but I mean, it really, that style of wrestling didn't really transfer over until just really like, the last few years.
Right.
But she was a true pioneer, and that's why I like her so much. And I hope the NWA does something more with her than just this one-off, but I don't have high hopes. Again, she's 49 years old, but just such an uber talented female. I hope that the NWA recognizes that.
Cool. I'll have to look more into her, because I don't think I've heard the name, but I don't think I've ever seen her.
Yeah, she's look for the female wearing like the Steiner style singlet from the 90s. You'll find her. She's not hard to find. And then there's Bianca Corelli, who is the daughter of Santino Marella from WWE, his fame. And then they announced Genocide, who, I mean, by all rights should be there. She's been one of the best parts of NWA Power.
Yeah, she's been great on Power lately. So
her and Lady Frost have been just perfect for that show.
Right.
A female that I'm not super familiar with in Masha Slamovich. I've heard great things about her, but I don't really know her.
She wrestles up here a lot in the Northeast.
And then they just brought in Thunder Kitty, who her gimmick is that she's a 100-year-old female wrestler. She's kind of a throwback. She actually trained out here in SoCal at the Santino Brothers Wrestling Academy. And that's the same place that's produced Brody King for Ring of Honor, Jake Atlas, who was in NXT, Tyler Bateman, also in Ring of Honor, Heather Monroe, who's now out in Florida, and my friend Ruby Reyes, who also wrestles out here in Southern California. I mean, they really produce a lot of great talents. So Thunder Kitty, I don't want people to sleep on her either. I think she's going to surprise some people. I mean, she's got a funny gimmick, but she can actually get out there and throw fits. So
I've seen her quite a few times. I think the first time I saw her was in an OVW match, and I thought it was a wild gimmick, and it was entertaining, but she sure can wrestle, and I've seen her quite a few times since then.
And she actually used to wrestle on some of the early episodes of Championship Wrestling from Hollywood when they first kicked off. She was a regular for them.
Oh, cool.
And then they've announced 3 of the 4 tag teams that will represent the NWA in their crowning of new tag team champions. The last NWA Women's Tag Team Champion actually defected to the WWF in the I think 1983, and they haven't ever recrowned new champions until now. And the first name announced was Marty Bell and Allison Kay. They're returning, teaming now as Team Hex. And that's really exciting because they both were such an influential part of the first 2 or 3 seasons of NWA Power. And then you have Sahara 7 and Renee Michelle teaming together, and Red Velvet and Kylan King. Now, you know Red Velvet from AEW. I'll be honest, I think Sahara 7's also works a lot of AEW, but I know Renee Michelle. I don't really know the 3 other ladies that well.
Right.
But, you know, I honestly feel like they're building this tournament for Team Hex anyways. So, I mean, I think it's already a foregone conclusion who's going to walk away with those tag titles.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with some of those. Just the 3 names that you mentioned, Team Hex, and then what was the other one?
Renee Michelle?
Yeah, that one. Sorry.
No worries. If they're watching, they're not going to. It's late where you're at. It's okay. They're not going to.
It is very late. It's cool.
And then, of course, the Knockout Championship match with Deonna Purrazzo and Melina. I mean, that was the match that needed to happen. Because I don't think you want to put Kylie Ray in a match for an Impact title, considering her history with that company.
How she left there, yeah.
Yeah, you don't want to put Camille in a match with Deonna Purrazzo. That just doesn't make much sense. And I think it was important not to use somebody like Chelsea Green, who's competing in Impact. It had to be an NWA wrestler. Too early for Lady Frost. Too early for Genocide. Melina's a veteran of the ring. She's in the Hall of Fame, for crying out loud. And she's a former WWE women's champion, Divas champion, I guess. So you got to give her some credit and put some respect on her name.
Right.
I still think Deonna Purrazzo walks out as champion, but I think she could put on a really good match with Melina, and I think we'll see something good there.
I think that'll be a fun match. It'll be really good because both competitors they're just really good wrestlers, the 2 ladies.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. And then the next night we get the 73rd. So
yeah, as predicted, everybody kind of figured that it'd be Trevor Murdoch and Nick Aldis. Between the history of the 2 in the last 6 or so months.
Yeah.
So what's your prediction on this match? I think that I think that a title change needs to happen because as we discussed about Nick earlier, it's something needs to happen. A little change of the guard, a little freshness to the NWA brand, even if it's for a short bit.
We talk about how great Ric Flair is as a world's heavyweight champion, right?
Right.
17 times he won a world championship, whether it be the NWA, WCW, WWE, WWF, whatever you want to call it. But he had to lose that title 17 times to do this.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And as awesome as a lot of people think it is that Nick Aldis' title reign has lasted over 1,000 days, let's not kid ourselves that there has been an extreme lack of competition for Nick Aldis. Who was he supposed to face at Crockett Cup 2020? Marty Scurll, a guy who he already beat at the Crockett Cup 2019.
Right.
You start looking at some of the names he defended the title against in the NWA. Tim Storm, a guy he had already beat. Flip Gordon, a guy he had already beat. Marty Scurll, a guy he had already beat. Robert Gibson, a guy he had already beat. And then exhibition matches against folks like Trevor Murdoch or Ricky Starks. Never was his title in peril. Never was he really in danger in an NWA match. I mean, he's 6'4", 245 pounds, 250 pounds. How big is Marty Scurll? 5'8", 5'9", $160.
Yeah, you might have a point there. Yeah.
I've never saw a match where I felt like Nick Aldis was the smaller guy, or ever where he wasn't the bigger guy. And he's a gifted wrestler. Mm-hmm. I want to see that man challenged, and I don't feel like he's been challenged. Like even Tim Storm. Tim Storm is great, but he's not Nick Aldis in the ring. He just isn't.
Right.
And so when Nick Aldis wrestles against Trevor Murdoch and that match ends and a disqualification, it left a really bad taste in my mouth. And I think there's something to be said too about Aldis being able to chase for the title. For one time, when he chased Tim Storm for that title, it was on clips of the 10 Pounds of Gold series, or if you were lucky enough to watch Championship Wrestling from Hollywood, these matches kind of were circling that area. So we didn't get the chase. We didn't get the story the way that it could be produced with NWA Power of Nick Aldis starting from the bottom and going to the top. So I think that would be a different position for him, and I think it would certainly bring something more creative than what we've had, because I feel like it's gotten very stagnant. And again, maybe I'm the dick, but I like Nick Aldis as a wrestler. I just think at this point, there's nothing more he could do in this run as champion that's going to make him more impressive to me. Are they going to bring in, Brock Lesnar to face Nick Aldis? Because that might make me pop. I might pop for that. But outside of that, I don't see there's anyone they could bring in. It's not going to be Samoa Joe. It's not going to be, Daniel Bryan. It's not going to be CM Punk. And I'm pretty sure it's not going to be Kenny Omega. So what can they do to make it interesting to take it away from them?
Right.
So I really feel like in this moment, it has to be Trevor Murdoch. It has to change. Now, the match I probably would have preferred to have seen is maybe Elijah Burke versus Nick Aldis. And I don't want to take anything away from Trevor Murdoch, but it really soured me that they did the match they did in Charlotte. And they showed it today on the NWA Power, the Race to the Chase series. They showed the result where Nick Aldis pinned Trevor Murdoch in the ring cleanly. He didn't cheat. He didn't cheat. There was no brass knucks. There was no Tom Latimer. There was no interference. It was a clean victory. And I feel like at this point, that match is done now. So I'm not as excited about it. But the idea of a change of the guard certainly, I think, will breathe some life into the NWA.
I think, like you said, that him versus Elijah Burke, I think, might have been just a phenomenal match, and enough to mention that it would be good if he took the title, Elijah Burke. You know what I mean? I mean, he's a well-deserved wrestler, I think.
I agree. I think Elijah Burke has been one of the best things about NWA Power since they've come back from this global pandemic. His series, his run with the TV title, beating Zicky Dice at Primetime Live to win the title, and then every other week he was defending that belt, be it Fred Rosser or Matt Cross, Tyrus. That he went out there and worked every week, and when he wasn't working, they put a big emphasis on who's going to be the next challenger for that title. So I really feel like if the NWA has done anything superbly outside of the women, I really felt like they did a great job with that TV title. So he's the guy I think would have made a lot more sense. Win, lose, or draw against Tyrus, going on to face Nick Aldis at the pay-per-view, I think would have made a lot more sense to me.
I don't understand why the NWA took the TV title off of Elijah Burke and put it on Tyrus. I don't think, to me, it makes no sense whatsoever.
See, so the creative wheels in my head can make a lot of good, compelling stories with that, and I hope that's what they plan on doing. But I mean, let's look at the bright side. Now Tyrus matches can go no more than 6 minutes and 5 seconds. So
could he work that long though? That's the question. I'm sorry to make it.
No, but that's one of the benefits. And then the other thing too is I don't think you're going to see Tyrus facing the same level of competition. Like Tyrus versus Matt Cross makes absolutely zero sense, and that match won't happen. But Tyrus versus Marche Rocket, Tyrus versus Jordan Clearwater, Tyrus versus anybody on the undercard, Sauer Naro, Colby Carino, all these Jeremiah Plunkett, Mims. None of those guys are going to get hurt by losing to Tyrus, and Tyrus can win those matches, and maybe he cashes in, right? And maybe after the next 6 weeks of television, 10 weeks of television, we get perhaps maybe a Trevor Murdoch as NWA World Champion versus Tyrus, the cashed in TV champion now challenging for the world title, and now you've got something that Trevor Murdoch hasn't faced, and that's a guy bigger and stronger than him.
You just made me look at that differently.
Yes. See, it's funny because it's all there, but you just have to interpret it however you want to. I don't think I'm not a booker. I've never done this professionally, and I know Billy Corgan has a lot of moving pieces, but there's ways to make these things work if they want to, if they go the right route. And I would love to see Tyrus go through a series of squash matches to get to Trevor Murdoch, and Murdoch could pin him, beat him, and then now we're done with Tyrus, and he could go back to Fox News and do his thing, and we can move forward. He got a good run with the TV title. He got to challenge for the 10 pounds of gold, and he can call it a career.
Right.
It's wishful thinking.
All right, so what's it? Mickey James takes on Kylie Rae at NWA 73.
That might be the match there's 2 matches on there that I think could steal the show. This is one of them. There's no doubt about it. Mickey James has a lot of gas in the tank.
Yeah.
And Kylie Rae is, when she's good, she's great. And I think if the NWA allows her to be great, she's going to be. And I'm excited for that match.
I think she's really finally found a place for her that matches her. You know, I guess that the reason why she wasn't sure that she wanted to continue with professional wrestling. I don't know, for personal reasons. Won't get into here, but you know, so I think that maybe the NWA, you know, she took off for a few months, and maybe the NWA might be perfect for her. I think, you know what I mean, and I think that she's really doing a really great job on Power, and I think that this will be a good match because, like you said, Mickey James still has a lot of gas in the tank, and she's been one of my favorites for a number of years. So.
I mean, I keep going back to her time as Alexa Lurie in Impact, or
Ring of Honor.
Wrestling. Ring of Honor, wrestling against Trish Stratus at WrestleMania. I mean, she is a phenomenal talent. Like, maybe she might even be a better booker because I'm so excited about Empower, but I still think she has a lot to prove. I think she has a lot to do in the ring. And the thing about her is because of the experience, because of who she is, you don't necessarily need to put her in a match with Camille. She doesn't need to be the NWA Women's Champion to be a draw. It's Mickey freaking James. That's all you need to put up there, and you know you're going to get a good match. So I think her and Kylie Rae will definitely tear the house down for sure.
Match that I'm interested in, and I don't know why the national champion Chris Adonis is taking on returning James Storm. Now James Storm had taken off to go back to Impact. I just thought that was a weird choice and a weird surprise that James Storm would be coming back.
Well, you know, he never really wanted to leave.
Okay.
He was, again, so the NWA, they had a lot of guys on 1-year contracts, and they were going to renew them at the end of the year. Okay. So he was one of those guys, and he actually, when he appeared on Primetime Live, he wasn't under a contract at that point. And he's a guy that I don't know why you wouldn't keep under contract, because he's a phenomenal talent. I know he's getting older. You know, we all are getting older, but he still brings a lot to the table. I'm not going to say his mic skills are on par with Nick Aldis's, but they're certainly right now, he would be like number 3 or 4 on my list for the NWA. His look is great. He's got the reputation. He's got the history, and he could still go in the ring. He's believable. I believe that dude could whip your ass if you got into a fight with him.
Oh yeah.
And so to bring him back the way that they're bringing him back, I'm glad he's going to be a part of the 73rd. I wish there would have been a better build for this match, because it just feels like, you know, hey, get a dartboard and throw the dart, and whoever's name is there, that's who Adonis is going to face. And the NWA has made no friends with the way that they've booked the national championship since Trevor Murdoch lost the title. Adonis wins the belt from an injured Trevor Murdoch. Let's keep that in mind. He lost at the pay-per-view, attacked Murdoch, and they're in the rematch. Murdoch is hurt. He wins the title. Eventually, Murdoch gets a rematch, and Murdoch is still injured and loses the match. And that's the last time Chris Masters has defended the title. He didn't defend it anymore We get to the setup for when Shadows Fall, and he abdicates the title to enter the Battle Royal, hoping to help Nick Aldis secure either himself or Tom Latimer as an opponent for when our Shadows Fall. That falls apart. He loses the title. They lose the Battle Royal. Murdoch wins it. Fast forward to the next season of Power, and there's a very short, unfascinating tournament that in the finals you get JTG versus Chris Adonis, and Adonis goes over. It was predictable, it was boring, and the wrong guy won.
That's what I'm saying, where the NWA is just taking a lot of there's a lot of they're not getting used. I think they're just not sure what they're doing half the time since coming back from COVID, and it's taken them a while to get going. So certain storylines to me just aren't making sense, you know. However, and certain talent in the ring is just not making sense as well, and that's like one of the moments like that I'm saying it just doesn't make sense.
I think when they came back, they knew they had to get some bigger names, right? Like they wanted to get more well-known names because they lost LA Knight, they lost James Storm, they lost Marty Bell, they lost Allison Kay, so they needed some umph. And now I don't know that Chris Adonis is umph, but he certainly has some name recognition, some face recognition. And I take nothing away from the athlete, I take nothing away from the wrestler. I just don't like the way that they've booked him, and I think he's capable of a lot more. So hopefully on this, you know, after this pay-per-view, whatever direction they decide to go with the national title, I hope there's a little bit more thought put into it, and that becomes more of a focus for the NWA. I just told you how great I thought they did with the television title, and I tip my hat to Billy Corgan. When you do something right, I'm going to say, damn it, that's great. And when it's awful, I'm going to say, damn it, that's awful. What they did for the TV title, they now need to do for the national title. It needs to be built up because it's basically meaningless at this point.
You're right, because they made a huge deal about the national title when they were bringing it back too. So you're right. And they
Willie Mack, Colt Cabana, James Storm, Colt Cabana, and then now we got this.
Right.
So
all right. So the World Tag Team titles, Kratos and Stevens taking on La Rebellion. So
individually, I love Kratos. Individually, I love Stevens. I'm not a huge fan of the team. I think they've made some headway on the last set of tapings. This match is kind of in a slow build, and of course, with the championship series, everything kind of got put on pause. And again, if I was running the show, I think I would have done the championship series first, and then what they did before, after, as a lead up to the pay-per-view, because you could have already kind of had this roadmap built. But La Rebellion is certainly an exciting tag team. Mecha Wolf is very impressive. Beastie 666, the son of Damien 666 from WCW and of course AAA. Very fun tag team. I love Lucha Libre, especially when it's done right. And seeing this match with Stevens and Kratos, I mean, it has a ton of potential to be fun. I'm hoping again we get a little bit of a change in direction with the NWA, and I'm hoping La Rebellion walks away with the tag titles. I think that would be what's best for the brand. But again, I'm not making these booking decisions.
I like that they were doing the storyline where Kratos and Stevens weren't necessarily getting along. You know what I mean? And then they found themselves across the ring on different teams on occasion.
Yep.
So, and it always seemed like every week you're like, oh, is this the week that, they're going to split? Is this the week? And that gives some excitement to watch. You know what I mean?
Sure.
It reminds me of like watching wrestling as a kid where I was excited. Like, you knew something was brewing, and then all of a sudden the last couple of weeks it just seemed to have gone away.
It simmered out. And, and it happened when they got some key victories too. You got to remember they defeated Adonis and Latimer. They defeated War Kings. By hook or by crook, they have victories over the two of the best tag teams in the NWA. So, I mean, there is some credibility there that victory kind of solves all problems. And as with weeks of turmoil, the more they started winning, the better they got along. So, I mean, I kind of see the point, but I also I'm ready for a new change. I mean, there's so many good tag teams in the NWA. The War Kings are one of my favorite. You also have Paro and Odinson, the end. I think they're highly underutilized. We haven't even talked about Hawk Ari yet, which I think is a great tag team. We haven't seen a lot of Strictly Business as a tag team, whether it be Latimer and Adonis or Aldous and Latimer or Aldous and Adonis. There just hasn't been a whole lot of that continuity. And then with Jordan Clearwater now working with Tyrus, we don't know what specifically is happening there. So, I mean, there's room for a lot of interesting things with the tag team division, and I'm hoping that this is a firecracker, a kickstart to popping that tag team division.
Yeah, I'd like to see more of those teams, especially the end. I think that they're a great team, and like you said, they're underutilized. I wish that they would come them out, because it seems like a lot of times they come out, they just get jobbed out instead of. And I know, like, I've seen those guys many, many times over the last few years, and they're a great team. So they need to do more with them, I think, personal opinion.
Do you remember when they brought Paro in for this first match, and he wrestled against Jordan Clearwater and literally just ate his lunch, like just beat the crap out of the kid?
Yeah.
And you think, holy crap, this guy is great. Like, I thought maybe he was just going to be a singles wrestler. And I'm thinking, man, in my head, I'm having these visions of Vader, and I'm thinking, man, you've got Tim Storm over here who's just doing commentary. You can put Tim Storm with him, be his Harley Race, and you've got something very, very interesting. And then they ditched, all my hopes and dreams with that when they brought in Odinson. I'm like, hey, this is even better. They need more tag teams. Great. This is like Demolition and the Road Warriors. This is like the Steiner Brothers and Doom. Like, we've got some legitimate, hard-hitting tag teams. Let's go. Let's get these hosses going. And it was not really that either. So it was like, what are you trying to do with the tag division? And like you said, there's times where I feel like Billy is dead on, knows exactly what he's doing, and can pull a great story out. And then there's times where I feel like maybe he gets bored with it, or maybe he just doesn't have a clearly defined vision, and is more of like, well, let's see what happens when we do this. And
right.
I don't think that's necessarily indicative of success quality.
There's a couple more matches that, and then we'll take it home. Tom Latimer is taking on Crimson, and then Tim Storm in a triple threat.
I talked about matches that I said what might steal the show. Tom Latimer's he's a beast.
He's amazing. Yeah, that dude has really impressed me since joining the NWA.
He looks like $1 million. Everything he does in the ring just seems to make sense. His personality is perfect for the character. It's like the Tasmanian devil running around that ring, just causing havoc. I love that guy. I want to see more of that guy. Crimson, we haven't seen a whole lot of singles Crimson, and what we've seen, I haven't been overly impressed. I know he's better than that. I know he's
smart.
He can come out and he could do some damage. I think he'll be a lot of fun in this match. And then Tim Storm is like everybody's pal. When they talk about our pal Sal, no, it's Tim Storm who everybody likes. And I think Tim Storm, again, he does such a great job in the broadcast booth, and I think they want him there.
He's really good on the commentary. I mean, I was really surprised when he joined in on the commentary how good he was.
When they lost Stu Bennett, I thought, well, that sucks, because he was really good.
He's good too, yeah.
And then when they put Tim in the booth with Velvet and Joe, I was a little tepid at first, but I really warmed up to Storm in the booth, and I think he's so good at it. I don't think they knew how good he was going to be, and they want to put him in that. He wants to be in the ring, that he wants to be out there. He wants to be physical, and I hope this is an opportunity for him to see more Tim Storm in the ring. But this match, I think. A bunch of hosses going out there fighting. It's not going to be pretty. We're not going to see a lot of wrist locks and single arm takedowns and double leg takedowns, and we're not going to see a lot of submission wrestling. We're going to see some dudes punching each other in the face, some forearm smashes, and just a lot of rough house wrestling. I like it. I'm excited for that match.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a good one. And then we have a 6-man tag: Tyrus, the Masked Man, Jordan Clearwater against the Pope in the end.
So,
not much to say about this one myself. So.
This is again, like, let's just throw darts at the wall and see what we can put together. I like the end. I already said that. I think Pope is second best guy on the roster. I've already said that. I'm not a huge fan of Tyrus, but I could see value in him. The Masked Mystery Man, I think, is going to be someone down the road who's going to be very important to the success of the NWA. But it's a weird dichotomy on how they book this guy, and it just I can't make heads or tail of it. And then who was their partner? I forgot.
Tyrus,
the Masked Man, and who else?
Oh, sorry, Jordan Clearwater.
So Clearwater, I mean, him and Tyrus kind of have that business proposition already going.
Yep.
Clearwater's a guy who I really, really like, and I don't think they let him be himself. Like, Jordan Clearwater is wrestling for New Japan Strong, and he's good. He wrestles in Championship Wrestling from Hollywood. He's good. He comes to the NWA, and then he seems to be less than good.
I see what you're saying there, because I have seen him in Championship Wrestling from Hollywood. That's where I first saw him, and I enjoy his work there. And the NWA, I was like, oh, this is great. He's coming here. You know what I mean? It's an opportunity for him, and he's not nearly as good. You know, it's like less than good.
And when you talk about a guy like Slice Boogie, who has a similar situation, right? I mean, he was in Hollywood. He wasn't booked as one of the top guys, but he's had a lot of good matches. His match against Davey Boy Smith Jr. at Primetime Live was tremendous. That guy can definitely go Slice Boogie.
Absolutely.
And in the NWA, they've booked him as a guy who is going to be a threat at some point. Maybe not today, but definitely, you know, standing toe-to-toe with Jack Stain, a former Grand Slam champion. I mean, that says something about your work ethic and your toughness, right? And to see that match, such a strong match, such a good match, and then see Tyrus, or not even Tyrus, but Paro just eat Jordan Clearwater's lunch. It's like these guys came from the same spot essentially, and one of them is looking really, really good right now, and the other not so much. And that's a bit of a head scratcher. I just don't get it.
Yeah. I'm still trying to figure out what they're doing with the Masked Man, because it seems like when he first came in, he was like kind of annihilating everybody, or the first couple matches, and then it seems like in the Champion Series he kind of got. Now, if I remember correctly, sometimes I'm a little off that he got his ass whooped pretty simple in a match, if I remember correctly.
Well, he had the match against Crimson, and that was a brutal match. I mean, Crimson really took the gloves off and was very rough in that match. But at the closing minutes of that match, we had the Masked Mystery Man with the the sharpshooter on Crimson. And what I really loved about it is he was punching the kneecap, really kind of trying to get Crimson to tap. It's very aggressive. But of course, the match ended at a double time limit draw. So there was a no decision there. And I feel like that masked man has a lot of potential. I think they need to quit pointing out that he's this mysterious man and just go with it. You know, oh, I know what he is behind the scenes. Stop talking about that, because whatever it is, it's going to be a letdown. It's not Daniel Bryan. It's not CM Punk. It's not. Yeah. It's not Bo Dallas. It's not Joe Henning. It's nobody that's going to be like, oh, that guy. But the person it is a very capable wrestler, very talented wrestler, and maybe would benefit from a manager if you're going to continue to push him in this heel position, or if he's going to slip over to the face position, maybe put him as a face. Personally, I'd like to see him in Austin Idol's camp. I think Austin Idol managing him would make a lot of sense, because he doesn't have to talk, and honestly, he shouldn't talk because he's not very good at it. And let Austin do all the talking and let him do all the wrestling.
I think they need to come up with a better name than Masked Mystery Man. So that's what they keep referring. You know, it's just he looks like he's wearing the Grappler's mask. If you remember the Grappler from old World Class days. So,
and I was thinking this whole time like spoiler, but yeah, I think you're right.
Oh, maybe the spoiler. Yeah.
Well, both of those. I mean,
they're very similar. Yeah.
Any kind of name. The Pugilist. You know, give me something different. The Masked Mystery Man. I mean, it's
corny.
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with corny, because that's kind of what the NWA has in spades, is the corniness. I mean, Carneyland isn't that long ago. You still remember some of the garbage that they put out there, but you know, and how beloved was the question mark.
Hey, I love that.
Yeah, they just have to find the right balance, and they haven't got there yet. But I think, again, if this guy starts winning some matches, we're all going to look at him a lot differently.
All right. Not to mention, there's also a 12-man battle royal. I'm guessing that's everybody else that's on the roster that was not mentioned this evening. So
yeah,
as far, I was wondering why Slice Boogie doesn't have a match after you mentioned his name, but I'm guessing that he's going to be in the battle royal. So
potentially,
I assume. Yeah.
He's also recently just signed with MLW as part of their new their new LAX with Danny Limelight and Conan's representing them. So it's kind of like maybe he's wrapping up his dates for the NWA. I know that Marquez has said that he still is working with them in Hollywood, and so is Danny Limelight. So it's not like it's an exclusive deal, but perhaps maybe the NWA and the MLW have a conflict where that won't work.
I hope so. I like Slice Boogie. I think that guy's got a lot of potential for the future. He really does. All right, with that being said, Jay, I'd like to wrap things up, and I'd like to say thank you for appearing here on the PWZ podcast. Why don't you plug some stuff?
Oh, I'd love to. You can check out. Now, this is one of my favorite podcasts to watch. I listen to it a lot, and Rick and I, we've been exchanging messages for quite some time. I really respect Rick a lot, and I feel like he respects me. So I appreciate. We have this very much mutual appreciation of each other. I love that Rick covers NWA content because that's pretty much exclusively what I do. On Tuesdays, we do a pre-party to get you set up for NWA Power, the hour before Power, and we're on YouTube at the Alliance blog. And that's just me talking about the news and information for the National Wrestling Alliance and previewing the card that's supposed to happen on Power on Fight TV. And then on Thursdays, my pals DKM and former World Junior Heavyweight Champion Kevin Frazier recap the episode of Power, and we do that every Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 o'clock Pacific, also at youtube.com/the Alliance blog. And then, of course, we're on all social medias at the Alliance blog. Make it easy for you. We're on Tumblr, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Twitch.tv, also YouTube. And the audio version of our podcast is available on Amazon, Spotify, Apple, at the Alliance blog. We, again, try to make it easy. And, of course, the website of record for all your NWA news and information is alliance-wrestling.com. We've been in business since 2007, covering the NWA in its entirety. So if you guys are big fans of the National Wrestling Alliance, please check us out. We'd love to have you a part of our hashtag NWA fam. And I really do appreciate your time, Rick, and having me on. I love talking about the NWA, good, bad, or indifferent. It's always a good time, and I'm glad you and I finally got to talk because it's something I've wanted to do for quite some time.
Yeah, same here. I'm finally glad I reached out to you because what was bound to happen is just I can't imagine why it took us almost 2 years. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you.